Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and Stacy, in this episode 440. We are back after a short hiatus. I am joined, as always, by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPatton89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing?
Doing all right. Can't complain.
Good to hear. Um, I feel like if you really thought about it, there might be a couple of things over the last week that you could complain about. We're going to talk about a couple of those things and maybe not another one. But before we do that, I do have to make a few announcements. First, Strickland has a YouTube channel where you maybe watch this podcast. If you are and you have not done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.strict.land. There's a link to the merchandise store. And there's all kinds of cool stuff that you can find on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. The Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Strickland's podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes from Obvious Bozos, a podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, along with Zach Blatter. And you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave about the Knicks even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Murdo, one of the best in the business. And now you get access to Strictly NFL, which you guessed it is our podcast about the NFL that is hosted by Constantine Metricos. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. It's got a variety of additional benefits, like listening in on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially goes to a podcast alongside yours. Truly, one day, whether you choose to subscribe, none of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from from football, NBA, NHL to entertainment and political props. Head to Bet Online today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet Online. The game starts here. So the Knicks have a basketball game tonight. They're playing the Philadelphia 76ers in the first group game of the in-season tournament. So big barn burner. A big game for the Knicks because, as you may have heard, they did not have a great week last week, like many people in this country. They went 1-3. They blew a game to the Hawks down the stretch. They blew a game to the Pacers down the stretch. On Sunday, they gave up 132 to the Pacers. They gave up 121 to the Hawks. The defense has definitely had its struggles. Mikal Bridges has been central to that. Karl Anthony Towns has been central to that. These are the Knicks' two main acquisitions over the offseason. So there is a lot of consternation and concern. And I can't say that those things are misplaced. But what I will say, and I was thinking about this as I was watching, not basketball over the weekend. I was watching football over the weekend, and I watched the Bills, who went on the road to the Colts, and the Colts are no particularly great team right now. Joe Flacco is winding down the stretch of some kind of career, hell of a career somehow. Um, and they did not play a clean game. They did not play flawless football. Josh Allen was not the best version of himself. And yet, because they have a group of players who are tied together and are doing their job, are not trying to do the 15th guy's job. They're not trying to do it. They're just doing their job and they're disciplined. They are able to win a game by multiple scores in what ends up being a very, very comfortable win on both sides of the ball. And then, because I'm a good friend, my pal, who's a Jets fan, wanted to watch a game, wanted to watch their game against the Cardinals at the bar. So I went, watched with him. And this Jets team, ballyhooed Jets team with all this talent, all these star names, they come out and they get their asses kicked by a Cardinals team that is younger and, the defense. I don't know. I don't know how many fucking guys on that defense can you name on the Cardinals defense aside from Buda Baker. I don't know. How many guys in the offense can you really name aside from, Kyler Murray and Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr.? And they kicked the Jets' ass. And I'm watching this game, and the Jets are missing 58 tackles, and nobody's where they're supposed to be. And it's like watching a chicken with its head cut off. And obviously, they get their asses kicked. And then after the game, you see guys on their social media freaking like on from the team, just like, arguing with fans and whatever. And why I bring all that up is because I think right now with the Knicks, I don't think this team hates each other. I don't think that they have bad chemistry. I don't think that they have. I'm not really concerned about their chemistry moving forward. But I do think that when you undergo the changes they have undergone over the last 8 months, actually, no, 10 months. So basically, since the OG Anunoby trade, so 10 months, you're talking about out the door Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, Emmanuel Quickly, RJ Barrett. Isaiah Hartenstein leaves in free agency. I think that's all the major pieces.
Quentin Grimes, your favorite.
Yeah, Quentin Grimes is out the door. That's 6. So you're talking about 6 guys that were in your rotation. And, in the case of Quickly and Randall and RJ Barrett and Hartenstein, these are guys that were here for multiple seasons as starters. Quentin Grimes was here for multiple seasons as a starter initially anyway. And Dante DiVincenzo obviously had established himself as a starter by the end of last year when we were like, wow, this team is so tied together. Everything is perfect. How wonderful. And I think, yes, when OG Anunoby got here, he slotted in and everything was immediately perfect. It was beautiful. We didn't have to. It was like, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe how perfect this trade is working. And I think a lot of that is because he just came in for one guy and he didn't have to adjust. Like there was no real adjustment happening in how the team played, other than the fact that OG Anunoby would do less on-ball creation, which benefited the team because that was not really something that RJ was doing very well in his time in New York. And so this team just fit together great. And even though Randall and OG went down at various points and whatever, they had this built up infrastructure and trust and chemistry and all these things that, yes, like, I'm not saying the numbers don't matter, stats don't matter. Of course they all matter. But they're not always just reflective of individual player skills or, or things. It can relate to how players fit together and how that works. And this lack of trust and like being tied together on a string, I think a lot of that is manifesting when I watch these Knicks now, where, look, Mikal Bridges has come in for a lot of criticism. And I think, look, when you get moved for the price tag he got moved for and you don't hit the ground running, guess what? Like that's just part of the that's just part of it. You're gonna have to deal with it. Do I think some people are taking it overboard? Yeah, sure, I do. But that's part of it. You just have to deal with that. And I don't think he's been on his best defensively. I think he's been really inconsistent. He's veered from there are games where he gets into ball handlers and then he doesn't at all. Like in this Pacers game, he didn't get into Halliburton at all. He didn't even he wouldn't even shade him into a direction. It was just kind of let him go wherever the hell he wanted and tried to react after that, which has been kind of a recurring theme in the games that he does defensively struggle in. And I think that he's playing, I don't even want to say tentatively on offense because I think he's playing unsure of himself on offense. I think he's playing a little bit skittish on offense. His first game, obviously, we all remember the first half. We're like, oh my God, can this guy never shoot again? Then I thought the next couple games were good. And then he's up and down. And I think it's figuring out how he fits in, figuring out his role. You're talking about a guy who probably has to make the biggest change in terms of what his role is within the offensive hierarchy. And then also what he's being asked to do defensively compared to what his role has been over the last year and 3 months when he was on the Nets, right? Where he was like, hey, you're the primary option. And because you're the primary option, we're probably going to give you a lesser defensive load. And even if we don't, like, yeah, of course your defense is going to take a hit because that's what happens. And I think he's dealing with a lot of that. I don't think he understands. I think he's still figuring out how to kind of calibrate his offensive mindset into what he's being asked to do in New York. I also think that Tom Thibodeau and Jalen Brunson need to consistently make it a point of emphasis to get him involved early in games, get him touches, get him going. And then, defensively, I just this is the part, like, I don't know. I think that some of it is on him, but I also think some of it, the scheme is not doing him a benefit, and it's especially not doing him a benefit because he's playing most of his minutes anyway with Karl Anthony Towns the 5, and Karl Anthony Towns the 5 can work in offensively. We know it can work because it's been working, and that's with the Knicks' own issues on that side of the ball. But defensively, if you're just asking him to play a straight drop, it's actually kind of weird. I feel like as the season has gone on, we're seeing more of him playing in drop, which is, I don't know. I don't really understand that at all. I thought the Hawks killed us at the end of the game because of that. I thought the Pacers killed us at the end of the game because of that. I thought, look at the games that the Knicks have blown in crunch time. I thought that was the case against Cleveland. I think that is, if Tom Thibodeau cannot accept that Karl Anthony Towns is not going to be good in drop, but he wants to keep running him out at center, then we're going to have problems. And yeah, like, can Mikal Bridges be better? For sure. But I also think, again, you're not doing him any favors by putting him in this situation. And then the other part of it is, like, I don't know exactly obviously I don't know what the Knicks thought when they were training for Mikal Bridges. What I will say is, one, this is not a player I've ever been super enamored with. I've called him mid-Cal Bridges for multiple seasons. I do think it was an overpay. I think I tweeted it at the time. I understood why they overpaid, but I did think it was an overpay. But I will say, like, if you're going to get the best out of him, if they thought they would get the best out of him by making him the point of attack defender and that was his role, then they misprofiled him because that's not what he's been the best at in his career. We talked about this in the Discord yesterday, but you can go back and watch clips of him in that series against Phoenix a couple years ago, and he was against Dallas when he was with Phoenix a couple years ago, and he got roasted. He got destroyed by Luka Doncic and Brunson at various points in pick and roll because that's just not his strength. That's not what he does well. He's a good off-ball defender. He's good at playing passing lanes. He's good at, tagging the roll man, getting back out to his guy. Like, he's good at those boring, detailed, team-oriented things. He is not good at, hey, you're on an island. Even in ISO, he's fine. He's good in ISO. But he's not good at, like, hey, you're playing Trae Young tonight. Go get him, Tiger. Like, that's just not that's not his thing. So
it's also the drop coverage puts more pressure on the on the point of attack defender to get over the screen, right? Because you are responsible for taking away that pull up.
Yeah, and look, again, I don't want to act like the scheme and Karl Anthony Towns is the only reason he's struggling, because they're not. He needs to be more physical. He needs to be more decisive. He needs to have a clearer plan of action defensively. But to go back to the original point I was talking about, chemistry, all these type of things, like, you can watch. Like, again, I don't think these guys have any issues with each other. I really don't. Like, I don't watch them. I haven't watched them in a game yet this year and been like, oh, I don't know about how OG and Karl Anthony Towns are fitting together, or how Bridges and OG or Bridges or whatever. Like, I don't think that is an issue, really. But what I do think is an issue is, do you have that built-in chemistry? Do you have that built-in trust? Do you have that built-in kind of, the kind of scar tissue you get from playing together and learning and kind of understanding each other's quirks and what each guy needs to lift himself up? There are times I watched that game against the Hawks. There were multiple times where I just saw, like, and this is weird because it's Josh Hart, right? It's like I was like watching Josh Hart or like Mikal Bridges just staring at a loose ball that they just didn't go chase, and, like, yeah, maybe it looked like it was going to go out, but there's a chance it would stay in, and then the Hawks would save the ball. And I saw that multiple times in that game. And that's the kind of thing where I'm like, okay, so maybe you guys were unsure of who should go for it. But then there should be like an immediate like communication of like, okay, no, you should go get that next time or whatever. Are you guys talking to each other? Are you directing each other? If Jalen Brunson runs a pick and roll with Karl-Anthony Towns and he fucking slow rolls 20 feet to the elbow, can Jalen Brunson be like, get your fucking ass out behind the 3-point line? Can you have those honest conversations? Can you have those hard conversations? Can you get on each other? And I'm not saying they can't do that yet, or I just don't know if they're comfortable doing that yet. There's a lot of moving pieces here. And then the final thing I will say is, in talking about identity and all that type of stuff, the Knicks have played exclusively with a rim rolling, low usage center who is generally, other than Jericho Sims, a quality rim protector over 4 years with Tom Thibodeau at the helm. I don't think it's a coincidence that they have played better, or not better, but they have a stronger net rating, and Brunson at times looks even more comfortable playing alongside Jericho Sims than he does with Karl-Anthony Towns, where it feels like he's figuring it out, where it's like, all right, this is a totally different type of center than I have played with over the last, 2+ years in New York. And that takes time. That's going to take time. I think focusing so much, there's a lot of, and I understand the focus on the offense after a game like Sunday, even though they scored 121 points, when you see, okay, they're not taking any threes in the second half, and the Pacers are launching like crazy in the fourth quarter, and then you're chasing the game and you're still not taking threes. I understand that consternation, for sure. So, it's sometimes we can lose there's so many things going on with the new team where we're all trying to like kind of figure out, okay, what are we good at? What are we bad at? How do we fix this thing? How do we and there's all kinds of different ways to go about it. But the main thing for the Knicks is get fucking tied together defensively. To that end, they did at least actually win the rebounding battle against the Pacers. Now I don't know what that means. That could mean maybe you win the rebounding battle because the Pacers shot the shit out of the ball, or maybe you win the rebounding battle because the Pacers are out 2 centers and Obi Toppin didn't play and their front court is now much more undersized, and there's all kinds of reasons why you could have won that rebounding battle. But they have to figure out how to get this defense consistent. And the last thing I'll say, since I've been going on for like 20 minutes here, the reason why I still remain fairly confident is I think this team, led by Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart and Tom Thibodeau as the coach, has earned more trust than freaking out and losing our fucking minds after 9 games and, memeing Mikal Bridges and Tom Thibodeau onto Osama bin Laden's fucking head. Like, I don't know. Like, I think that they've earned a little bit more benefit of the doubt than that. I know that's hard to believe for some people who want to cry and bitch and moan every time the Knicks fucking lose a game because you're 6 years old. But I think they should, and they have earned more of the benefit of the doubt than that. And I also think that look at their net rating through these 9 games when they've been really up and down. And that makes sense because you're talking about a team with a lot of moving parts that is trying to get cohesion and chemistry. And while that's very frustrating while we're going through it, I think it's really easy to think the lows are the truth and the highs are the aberration. Whereas the reality might be somewhere closer to in between, or maybe even closer to the highs. But their overall net rating is very strong. And net rating is, generally speaking, the biggest truth teller over the course of a season. If you have a strong net rating and you have a middling record through 30 games even, it's very likely you're going to go on a run at some point. If you remember, a couple of years ago, Boston, we famously beat them on an RJ Barrett buzzer beater, which put them, I think, a game under 500. Or maybe left us the same record. We're both 500. I don't remember what the fuck it was exactly. But their net rating was like much, much stronger than that. And what happened? They went on a run the second half of the year where they were basically the best defense in basketball, and they get to the NBA Finals, and they probably should have won that Finals. But the point being is, I think there's still plenty of signs here to be encouraged by, and it's easy to focus on the negative and also assume that the negative cannot be fixed or won't be fixed or won't ever get better. And I just disagree because one, we've seen the upside of this team. Two, I don't care what people say. I think it does matter that Landry Shamet and Precious Achua both got hurt right on the eve of the season when we had already thinned out the roster, obviously, with the moves we've made. And that Mitchell Robinson's obviously not going to be back until maybe December or January. And Cam Payne has missed a couple games. Like, these things do matter when your margins in terms of depth are already limited. And yes, Tom Thibodeau should, he cannot keep playing 6.5 guys. You've got to trust Tyler Kolek a little bit. You've got to trust Pacome Dadier to give you 8 to 10 minutes. Like, these things cannot sustain over a longer sample. And really, very, very specifically, you cannot run OG Anunoby 41 minutes on a random Sunday in November. Like, that just, you can't do it. So, sorry for rambling. Needed to get a lot off my chest.
Yeah, I mean, I think we always talk about it. The Heat started, what is it, 8-8, 9-8, the Heatles. So those are two of the top 25 players of all time. Probably were two of the top 3 players at the time, along with Kobe. So it's there are talented teams that have really taken some time. I think the net rating, the Knicks, to your point, 8th in net rating. I'll also say, the defense has been poor, 21st in the league. We talked about a lot of reasons, but the Knicks have played 9 games. A third of those have come against the Pacers and Celtics, which were the 2 best offenses in the league last year. Some have said historically good offenses. In one of those games, they actually acquitted themselves really well. Cleveland is 12-0. I actually think Cleveland is a really good illustration of kind of what we talked about. This is a lot of what people have talked about. Yes, Mobley has improved. Yes, Garland, is healthy again. But, Donovan Mitchell has talked about, kind of creating room for those guys to really adapt to, assert themselves while he's still there, right? That whole process of that team fully meshing took 3 years, right? I think the Knicks are capable of doing that a lot quicker. Mobley was obviously younger. Garland's had health issues. But it kind of goes to show that, it takes time to really get the most out of your guys. But Cleveland 12-0, right? So, and then even Atlanta is a feisty team that's given the Knicks problems in the past. I do think fatigue caught up with them. These fourth quarter collapses, it's tough not to draw a bit of a line. I saw someone say, "Well, you can only blame the starters or fatigue for choking away the lead if you think the bench or playing the other guys would have extended it, playing them more would have extended it." But to me, that's just you don't even know, right? We haven't seen it, and we know that they have really struggled to close games. Have they won a close game? Really?
Technically, the Miami game.
Okay. But you see a lot of, most of the games they've won have been blowouts. So while I defend them because I'll say that, besides Detroit, all of these teams look like potential play-in teams at the minimum.
Even Detroit might be a play-in team, to be honest.
Yeah, there's if you look at the league now, there's very few gimme games. Like Charlotte is playing like a serious team this year. The only teams that are truly tanking, I think, are Portland, Washington, and Utah. Everyone else is at least trying to win. So there's very few gimme games.
I don't even think Portland's like tanking. I think they just suck.
Yeah, but those are only 3. Those are the only 3 I'd put there. New Orleans is not playing well, but we know that they have a lot of talent. And then you have teams like we're going to have to play Brooklyn, and Brooklyn has been feisty. They've been playing pretty hard. I do not think that is really because of Cam Thomas or anything, but he clearly fits a role there. So I think you're going to have to go deeper. I think the reality is there are things Tibbs can do to fix this defense, but this is kind of I think with this lineup until we get Mitchell Robinson back or make another trade if we have to, mid to low teens is kind of the goal in defensive rating ranking. I don't think they can get to like an elite defense playing Cat at center. I think if they get Mitch back healthy, that's very much in the cards. I think you can, you can be an elite defense, Mitch, McCall, and OG. I think you can also, I do think at some point they have to. It's not just playing cat and drop. It's also just against certain defenses, switching will also just prevent some of the overhelp. Tyrese Halliburton isn't going to terrify anyone as a one-on-one scorer. When he gets in the paint and you help, that's where you get hurt. That's the same thing that happened with the Hawks, right? And I'm like, a lot of people just say that it's an archaic scheme or whatever. I'm not going that far. What I'm saying is against certain offenses, especially when you go out and get these 6'8", 6'7" wings, and you say that it's for switchability, and you say you have a mobile big like Cat, you need to start leaning into those things a lot more. I think any of us would take Cat on Tyrese Halliburton in an ISO, or in that kind of a situation over Halliburton being able to pass out of a double team. So I think there's low hanging fruit, but I think we have to realistically understand that going forward for the next, until Mitch gets back at least, or until they add some kind of rim protection, this is probably going to be a middling defensive team. But that net rating so far with the Knicks still, they're second in the league in offense, so that nets out to about the 8th best team in the league. As of today, their net rating is the 4th in the East. You play the bench a little bit more, the defense gets used to each other, and the offense actually hasn't reached its ceiling yet either. I don't think that, this is the offense is second in the league, by the way, with Mikal Bridges shooting 31% from three, with Brunson kind of being a little bit up and down. With a lack of depth and guys getting tired. I think Towns has been shooting very high from three. Maybe that comes down a little bit, but on the other hand, they still are not really meshing in pick and roll, to your point. And I think that, like chemistry means more than just, do they like each other, right? I think they really like playing with each other or being on the court together. But communication, that stuff, it took Cleveland a while, and it'll probably take the Knicks over the course of the season at least to work out a lot of those bugs. But 4-5 doesn't look great. We've had some rough losses, but all things considered, 8th in net rating in a pretty competitive year is something you'd take, especially with the schedule the Knicks have
had. I would even say, and look, I'm not trying to gas them up because I really don't think the Bucks are much of a contender this year. But they lost 2 super close games to Cleveland in a row. And then they followed up getting absolutely shellacked by the Knicks on Friday by losing a close game to the Celtics on Sunday. I'm not trying to act like this is the best victory ever, because God knows the Bucks have been a disaster so far this year. But even that is kind of encouraging, right? Where you're like, okay, so they destroyed this team that has actually been playing more.
They have Giannis, they have Dame. This is not
so
it's not the Pistons.
So maybe the Knicks don't really have a high quality victory yet, but I don't know, man. Even Miami, they're a pesky 4-5, very Miami-ish team.
They beat the shit out of the Pacers. That's probably their best win. But
right, and I know the Pacers were struggling and whatever, but this is the thing. It's I think it's kind of weird how I can understand how national guys or fans of other teams are gonna clown the Knicks any opportunity they get, and clown on Mikal Bridges every opportunity they get. That makes complete sense. I would do the same if I were not a Knicks fan and I was wanting to make fun of the Knicks. I just think it's crazy how it feels like so much of the fandom has completely and I guess part of this is the fact that you did trade all those picks for Mikal Bridges, so it's almost like, well, this is our team now, so what the fuck. But so that game against the Pacers, to your point, that doesn't count, but this one counts, and their injuries don't count. Their injuries count for double. Our injuries don't matter. It's really early in the season. I still think that, and I'm not even just for the Knicks. I think it's really, really foolish to draw too many conclusions from the first 10 games. I think you can draw some, there's some stuff that just stands out. To me, I think it's I feel pretty confident in saying that Phoenix is a contender, assuming health, given what I've seen from them early this season, just because they've so vastly outperformed what you would have expected in terms of just all of it. Like their shot distribution is better and blah, blah, blah. Like it all looks good. Budenholzer's a really good coach. We know that. So like there's some stuff that I think we can say like Cleveland is probably better than we all expected. I think that's like safe to say. There are just some things you can just draw conclusions from. But aside from that, like I think a lot is still very, very up in the air and in flux. And it's it's understandable to jump to conclusions. I just would pump the brakes. And honestly, I find myself just like not really interested in engaging with it half the time, like because I'm just like, I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just a fucking. I guess I'm just like appealing to the authority of the Knicks and Tom Thibodeau, but I just kind of have faith in them to figure it out as the season goes along. And look, I know that obviously Tibbs did have a disaster season with the Knicks a second year in charge. I would say this team's talent level is on an entirely different planet from that team. And like now, if the main concern for me is if we get Precious back and we get Mitch back, and Tibbs he still is only using Cat at the 5, because to me, when you made that trade, I know the immediate kind of conclusion was like, well, the Knicks want to go 5 out, and now they can do that, and that's that. I don't agree with that. Like, I think that the reason you make that trade is to have the ability to go 5 out, but also maintain the ability to play with 2 bigs and have quality spacing. And if he does not go, like if he does not lean into that and just sticks with Cat at the 5, then I would be concerned. I also don't expect that to be the case because this is Tom Thibodeau we're talking about. Like, I cannot envision a scenario where he has Mitchell Robinson healthy and he has Precious Achiuwa healthy, and he's just punting on any opportunity to play them alongside Karl Anthony Towns. Because I do think that the Knicks need those minutes. I think they need to be able to attack teams in multiple ways, right? Like, again, not like to go back to like a football analogy, but it's like you don't want to just be like a power running team. You want to be a power running team that has the ability to attack down the field in the passing game and like leverage those things. I don't think the Knicks shouldn't just want to be a 5 out team. They should want to be a team that can play 5 out, that can play with 2 bigs, that can do all variety of things, that can switch, that have lineups that can switch across positions, that have, that can play different coverages. That should be the goal. And the history of Tibbs teams tells us that his teams generally start out slowly, and then usually around a quarter of the way through the season, they figure it out and go on a run. And I don't see any particular reason so far to freak out about that still being kind of like the pathway for success for this team. If you go back and look at the Knicks start of the season last year, they lost a pretty embarrassing game to a full strength, or not a full strength, sorry, a Cavs team that was down, I believe, Jared Allen and Garland. Yeah, like they lost that game in the Garden. They lost a game to a Suns team that was down Durant and Beal, and we know the depth of that Suns team last year was atrocious. They lost that game at the Garden. Like, you can find these weird bad losses at the start of seasons with the Knicks over the course of Tibbs's time here. And then it usually resolves itself in the end. So I keep repeating it, and I probably sound like a fucking zealot at this point, but I just believe that they will figure it out. And like, you mentioned the clutch rating, the clutch, how they perform. I think they have the second worst net rating right now in clutch minutes in the league. Mind you, the sample size is extremely small. I think they have like a 14-minute sample, and OKC has the worst net rating in clutch time in the league. They have the highest, or they have a 4-minute sample. So you're talking about very small samples here. But I do think it's safe to say close game, late game, fourth quarter execution is something that they're still really like behind on both ends of the floor, and that needs to be resolved. But that's kind of a thing that you would almost bet on getting better, right? Because one, how could it be worse than what the fuck we've seen so far? And two, it's like that is literally what developing cohesion and chemistry and familiarity is, right? Like that's like where it manifests the most. So I still have faith in that. I also have a thought, and I'm curious to get your feelings about it. I think that they're doing too much to keep Brunson off of like switches. I think they're not trusting him enough. There's so many times where I see like another team will put Brunson in the action, and then even if Brunson gets switched onto a player, all of a sudden somebody from the weak side is like helping way over, and then they're giving up an easy swing pass, and it leads to a corner three or something. And I'm just like, I don't think Brunson is that bad a defender, especially in ISO, where you need to like freak out and start sending like overloads in his direction. And if you are going to do that, then it probably needs to be more organized than it has been so far this year, which again comes back to like guys being on the same page and being on the same string and all those type of things. It just feels like they're doing a little bit too much to kind of hide Brunson at times or account for Brunson being a defensive liability at times. And then obviously, as we talked about, the Karl Anthony Towns, look, just stop playing him deep drop. I don't know how much more evidence you need that that's just not something he's good at. Like, I think if you want to mix it in a little bit just to, have an off-speed pitch, sure. But you've got to have different coverages. You've got to play more aggressive coverages. And honestly, with OG Anunoby playing the way he is and having, Mikal Bridges, size and wingspan and having Josh Hart, like you really should. Like these are guys that can cover space well. Like this is, I don't know why you should not acquire OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges and then trade for Karl Anthony Towns and feel married to drop coverage. And honestly, married to drop coverage at a level that like I don't even like. I don't think we've been this attached to drop coverage in the last couple of seasons. This is like square one Tibbs stuff. So maybe this is a case of him wanting to get everybody really, really, drilled into the base, and then he's going to build out, which I think might be the plan. I'm just at some point, you're 9 games in. I think we've seen enough of like I don't think there are issues that they don't know what they're doing in drop. That's the way I'd put it.
Yeah, we've seen it like with Hartenstein, right? It's like once Hartenstein was able to do the things Tibbs wanted, he adapted more to Hartenstein, right? So he wants to see that you can do it first. So it could be something like that. I'm a little bit. I definitely agree on Brunson. I think I forget if it was Benji or someone posted a video, right? But there's a possession where Brunson, they run a screen, he gets over it, he gets switched on to Trey, and he holds up fine. And then the Knicks don't double or anything. The next possession, he gets switched on to Trey again, not in a threatening position. I think it was Hart or OG or someone else comes and doubles and leads to an open three, right? The thing is, you will, against, especially these teams, right? There are teams where this is not going to be true, right? The Suns, maybe, for example. But against most teams, and especially these teams that are going 5 out with like maybe not great on-ball talent, you probably want to just live with ISOs, right? If someone's going to try to ISO Brunson with Trae Young and you want to do that 40 times a game, we'll live with that. And if he starts getting hot, then you figure it out, right? But I think doubling just plays into a lot of those teams' hands, and I think drop puts them in a situation where they often have to double.
Specifically with the Hawks, I think that was like a main. I mean, there was a few instances in that game where it was like, oh my god, holy shit, Brunson's on Trae Young. We have to fucking send help. And you're like, why are you? It was there's one possession I remember very, very specifically. It was the Knicks were up 110-105, and that's exactly what happened. And then, like I think it was Mikal goes over to like kind of force the ball out of Trae Young's hand, and then OG had to go cover Mikel's guy, and then they swing it to the corner, and that rotation isn't on point. So they get a clean open look from three, and it's like, that's a killer. Like there's just, and look, this is the one thing I will criticize Tibbs for, because I think this has been a consistent throughout his career, and I will never understand it. When you're up in the fourth quarter, like you have to play situationally, right? Like every decision you make is based on situation in the fourth quarters of close games, especially. You should not just be giving up open threes, especially if you're holding on to a lead, right? Like you have to make decisions. You have to make kind of trade-offs. And just how often the Knicks collapse onto any type of paint touch, and where it's like it's not one guy, it's like three guys are collapsing down into the paint, and then you're just putting yourself in scramble mode as soon as if they make a kick out. Like that's not okay, and it's stupid. Actually, it's like not smart. So there's some situational stuff they need to clean up, and this goes on Tibbs too. But like, look, some of the stuff where I just find the Brunson thing like very weird, because I just don't view him as like, I'm not calling him like a plus defender or something, but I just don't view him as this massive defensive liability that needs to be like hidden at all costs or something.
Yeah, I mean, at least during the regular season, I think there's going to be teams that can exploit that. There always are. But generally, when teams have done it, right? The Sixers went on Brunson quite a bit. The Pacers, when the Knicks would switch Brunson onto Turner, were willing to shoot over him. He got switched onto Embiid. They try that in the playoffs. That one game where Embiid was just hitting everything. But sometimes you have to be able to live with those things, because I think just allowing all of these threes, so this tracking data can be suspect, so taking it with a grain of salt. But I think it was Drew Steele who shared this in the Strickland. Or no, sorry, it was Tommy Beer and Drew shared this. So Tommy Beer shared the stat: 44 out of the 46 threes the Pacers took were open or wide open. Now, I don't know if there's benchmarking on that, how much variance there is between the tracking data. From watching, though, it definitely seemed like they had a lot of good looks, and a lot of that comes from getting the Knicks in rotation. And Tibbs harps on, we have to not be in rotation by walling up the paint, but that's not always realistic. And the Knicks, to your point, the Knicks have some guys who struggle a little bit at point of attack defense. You have to be willing to stay at home and let them make tough shots. And that's really what the Pacers did to the Knicks. The Knicks scored 121 points. The Pacers are willing to say, hit tough twos, shoot a really high percentage, shoot a good rating on tough twos. You're not going to beat us with open threes, and you're not going to get a ton of, you're not going to beat us with open threes, right? The Knicks may want to lean into that, especially right now where they are a little bit more offensive oriented. But I think it's still I think closing games, you're going to have to, depth is to me still not using the depth. It's not as much even like Kolek. At the wing, if you don't
the Kolek thing against the Pacers was fucking weird though. Like, come on,
1 minute, yeah. That's also I don't know if Kolek seems like everyone loves him, but that's the kind of thing that kind of fucks with a young person, or a young player, right? Like 1 minute in, like you can't get a rhythm. That I used to happen to Deuce a lot, right?
I think you can't get a rhythm 1 minute in, Stacy.
I don't know. Takes your mother a while to get warmed up too. But it's the wings where I really feel like we're asking a lot out of OG, Mikel, and Hart. And it's tough to maintain that energy throughout the game. That's just a fact. Or if you want to say, well, Hart maintains it, or if you want to have like that mentality.
Hart is its own fucking thing. Like I don't even think we can compare Josh Hart to anybody else. Hart is like,
and we should talk about how awesome he's been. But
he's been great. He's been fucking awesome. He's probably been the next, best or second best player, however you want to put it.
But especially
maybe third, whoever. I think OG's actually been great too. So
yeah, Hart has a case averaging 13, 9, and 5 or something like that. 14,
he's also
9.
I think he has the best true shooting percentage. I think he's the best 2-point percentage in the league or something.
Wow. He has been finishing really well, getting the line. So yeah, we'll definitely talk about Hart. But you're asking a lot of those three guys plus Deuce, but Deuce is not playing.
So Josh Hart. Sorry, I just want to get this. Josh Hart has the best 2-point percentage in the league. and he's leading it by 4%.
Or who, like Gobert or something?
Right position, wrong player. Daniel Gafford.
Makes sense. So very impressive there. But you're asking a lot of those three guys, especially now when you have Brunson and you have Cat, right? You need your wings to do a lot to cover a lot of ground because those guys are going to get beat, or when someone gets beat, you don't have protection at the rim. And they want to, they're getting in transition. Those guys are usually the guys going in transition, and you're trying to get them to force turnovers. So I think they just signed Matt Ryan. I don't know how viable he is.
He's got it. Like, this is the thing with stuff like that. You can't sign a guy who's basically like, this is just Doug McDermott, right? This is just like, he's just one of those guys that fits exactly into that role. Just fucking play him. Like, there's no way you can tell me that, the Pacers can play Javante, give me Liberty, Freeman, or give me Death, for fucking 10 minutes in that game on Sunday, and you can't play Matt Ryan for 5. Like, Matt Ryan can play. Just play him, put him out there for like 5 minutes. It's not gonna. There's no way if you're gonna get. You're not getting blitzed in 5 minutes like that. You're just not. And you know what? I bet you some of his worry is he wants to play him with the bench. Okay, take Mikal Bridges out early and have Matt Ryan play some minutes with the starting group, and then you can still have Mikal Bridges come in with the bench. Like, it's fine. He's got to give these guys chances because, look, I really don't worry about the minutes too much with Mikal Bridges or Josh Hart, and I actually think for the most part, the minutes for Towns and Brunson have been okay. Like, I'm not that worried about those two.
I'm worried a little bit with Towns because he does have the injury past, but
he does have the injury past. I always have felt like some of his injuries are very not recurring and they're kind of fluky. Anyway, yes, I don't know how much of those are fatigue related, right? So like that's the other part of his injuries. Whatever, separate thing. But like with OG, we know he has an injury history, and you're seeing the way he's playing right now. You're like seeing the value he gives. You've got to try and harness that and maximize it as much as you can. And look, I'm all for trying to win each game and all that stuff, and I think that's valid. You also, part of trying to win each game is like taking a long view a little bit, right? Like, okay, I don't know that play. Like, do you really think that you got the most out of OG Anunoby by playing 41 minutes last game versus if he had played 36? I think you could argue no. Like, I think you can argue pretty reasonably you might have gotten more out of him if you gave him more rest. And I think that's where you need to play guys like Matt Ryan and Tyler Kolek and Pacome Dadier. Like, just give these guys 5 minutes. That's it. Almost 5 minutes each half max. And that buys guys rest. And between like that, those minutes you're going to give those guys, and Deuce being somebody you truly trust to play like 25, that really should be enough to keep the minutes at a reasonable load. And like, with the Towns thing, I'm not too worried about that because I also think his minutes will naturally go down when Precious gets back. Because he clearly does not trust Jericho Sims. I think that's very obvious that Tibbs does not trust Jericho Sims. He basically does not trust him against any starting center at this point. So that's how he's like matching his minutes. So it's, I think it's fair to criticize Tibbs for that. I also I'm so over like, man, we're really 9 games into the season. I'm seeing people talking about like fire Tibbs. Tibbs is going to kill these guys. He's a terrorist. Like, it's just like, how miserable can you fucking be? Jesus, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of long-term, the chatter after, especially last year, like, and it's a way that they discount anything the Knicks do. I'm not talking about Knicks fans, but I'm talking about on the national level. They only win because Tibbs plays his guys heavy minutes in the regular season. But I think if you're that out on Sims, they don't have a lot of get right games. I would be looking at Huck Porty. Like, he needs to get some cameos. I understand, Dadier may not have looked great, but then it's Ryan. Shaman will come back. I do think that once we get a little more depth, like I think some of the guys or some of the minutes will change. I don't think Sims will be long for the rotation. If Mitch is really out for a long time, then I think Tibbs is going to force their hand to make a move to move Sims to the bench, and I'm totally fine with that, depending on who it is. But obviously, I wouldn't want to. I mean, I have to think that if they're thinking about moving Deuce for a center this offseason, it's very difficult for them to do that right now. I mean, he's been a very important part of this team. I'm sure his role will reduce somewhat, maybe as they get healthier. But in 27 minutes a game, he's averaging 11, 3, and 2, shooting 40% from 3 on 5 attempts per game, which comes out to about 10 attempts per 100. So pretty high volume, high accuracy shooter. Doesn't turn the ball over. Can operate as secondary ball handler and a pretty solid defender. But if Mitch isn't going to come back healthy, then they're going to have to make a move. And if he is, then I think that this is not going to be what the team looks like. But that wing rotation, especially with OG, to your point, I worry a little bit about. And Matt Ryan, they're still in some of these games they're losing that 3-point battle, right? I think they've done a better job of it late. I don't know. I remember they were ranked very low in terms of 3-point attempt rate. I don't know what they are now. But Matt Ryan is the kind of guy who, without having to, and I think a lot of people would agree that it has less to do with the personnel. I think because besides a couple of holdouts, there are fewer people on the. We need to not start Deuce McBride. I don't know why PvP stats isn't working, but I think they've been better at getting 3-pointers up. But we saw in the Pacers game, and the Pacers are a team that takes a lot. But they didn't take a ton, right? But I think they took 15 more threes than the Knicks. That's not something that should happen. And I think the bigger part of it, to the point I was making, is that this is still a team that's figuring out how to attack. The Pacers also will just bait you into taking more of those twos, especially on a night when they're shooting well. That changes things. So the Knicks are the Knicks are still lower in 3-point rate. It looks like 20th or so in the league with a 3-point attempt rate of 39.6. Celtics lead the league with 56%. So the Knicks are still probably can afford to take more threes. A guy like Matt Ryan is where you don't have to change. If the Knicks are still struggling a little bit to kind of get the ball movement going, figure out, when are we going to attack switches? When are we going to, work for a better shot? How are we going to move? If they're still getting that offensive kind of being on the same page together, a shooter like Ryan who can just come off and get 4 or 5 up, that's the point I'm trying to make. Like that's a little bit of a cheat code and it helps you even out that math.
And some guys are just easier to like a guy like him who there's no ambiguity about what he is, right? It's just this is what you do. Some guys like that usually tend to be able to slot in quicker. And they're like the perfect innings eaters in situations like this, where it's okay, throw the guy in. If he's hot, you can buy yourself 5 minutes pretty easily, right? If he hits 2 threes, that's 5 minutes that he's bought for you right there. And if he's not, then you just pull him out after 2 or 3 minutes, and that's it. It's just so easy to manage guys like that. And to your point, it helps even out the math potentially too.
Yeah, and it helps even out the math without them having to make structural changes to the offense, right? This is the difference in a guy like Mikal Bridges. This is what we saw, right? Grimes was a shooter, right? Was a good shooter, but he struggled to get that volume up. Put in DiVincenzo, we didn't change too much of the. I don't think we ran. I mean, certainly before Randall and OG got hurt, it's not like we were running a ton of stuff for DiVincenzo, but he gets his shots up, right? Contest deep wherever. And he's pretty accurate, and that's what you'd hope for from Ryan. Ryan's 6'8". I think he's listed at 6'8". Might be in actuality closer to 6'6". I'll ask you this: I haven't watched a fair amount of his defense. I would imagine if a guy is that good a shooter and isn't just in the rotation, that's probably the issue.
Sorry, can you just repeat that again?
Have you watched a lot of Matt Ryan's defense? Because a guy with the rep
I
of
have
being a
not.
shooter like that, you would imagine that's the issue, right?
I have not, but I'm also like, your defense is 21st right now. Like, it's not been very good. And I think a lot of it is, like, again, I know people don't want to hear it, but like, Mikal Bridges, I think he's 4th in the league in minutes per game right now. I know he's been an Iron Man in his career. I don't know that you want to just like assume that because he's an Iron Man, he never gets tired. Again, like Josh Hart's one of one. I don't know. I literally don't think I've watched a player like Josh Hart in my life that's just like, I don't think he gets tired actually. Like I really like I don't he gets better. I think his worst minutes are at the start of games. I thought this forever. I said this in the playoffs during last year. I'm like, yeah, the first like 6 minutes of the game, Josh Hart's just out there like fucking around. He's just not locked in at all. And then he just gets better as the game goes on, usually in terms of his focus and everything. That's its own thing. Like I don't think most human beings don't work that way. Um, if you can just if you buy, maybe you hurt your defense in like the second quarter, but maybe it improves your defense in the fourth quarter because Mikal Bridges is fresher or OG Anunoby's fresher or whatever. Like that's kind of the trade-off you have to try to make there. And like if you want to kind of juice the offense while Brunson is out, which I still think is like the best path, especially until Precious is back, of kind of like being effective in those minutes. A shooter like Matt Ryan playing off Cat is probably not a bad place to be. Also, the one thing I will say is like I feel like Tibbs is always very, very vanilla with his offensive playbook at the start of a season, especially in terms of who he's trying to get going and how he's utilizing them. I think when he has a shooter like Matt Ryan and these kind of movement shooters and guys that get the volume up, he gets a little bit more into his bag and gets a little bit more creative. So I just think he needs to play more for a variety of reasons. That last one just being kind of like a hypothetical and more of a want than a this is exactly what will happen.
Yeah, and who knows what's going to. I mean, part of it is also they just signed Matt Ryan, right? So there might be getting on the same page. I will say it's interesting because the injuries are starting to add up. You lost Payne. I think Deuce is questionable for the next game. The next game's tonight, right? Yeah, today's 7:30. At Philly. So Deuce is questionable. I think you're probably gonna have to play a little bit of Kolek more, and I do worry about the defense there. Um, I do want to talk about Sims a little bit. Like,
You're a big Sims guy.
I actually haven't thought I think he has very obvious limitations.
I think he's been good I think he was good this week. I thought he was good, flat out.
Like he's never going to be a good rim protector. But one thing he does is he does a good job on the glass on both sides. He's not going to give you much on offense. But it's that lack of rim protection, and they're not using him. The one thing he can do decently well is move his feet on the perimeter and switch. And they're not using him for that either. So on the one hand, to your point, I do think like it's been better than I expected, but Tibbs clearly doesn't trust him much at all. And he doesn't trust him to play next to Cat. At some point, do you think if it's that level of trust, I wonder what's happening with Hukpori in practice, right? Because Pease looks pretty capable when they've put him in. So,
yeah, look, I'm not sure exactly what's going on here because I know Tibbs likes playing two bigs together, and I think we have evidence in Towns' very, very, very recent career that he actually plays better with another big next to him, or at least there's value in playing him at times next to another big. The Sims thing is weird because I agree with you. I actually think he's played well this past week. I thought he played well. I think you could argue he was the one guy that played well in each game. I mean, him and OG probably were the two that really played well in each game. But Yeah, I don't know. Like he, I, I mean, look, based on the net rating, we should just fucking start Jericho Sims. Uh, I know. I do think he should play a bit more right now. If this is how he's going to play, I don't mind playing him more. I think there's obviously still like a minutes cap, and it's diminishing returns on a guy like him. But what is he averaging right now? Like 8-10 minutes a game. Like you could, I don't know, the way he's playing right now, I wouldn't mind putting him in there for like 12 to 15 because to your point, like let's get Cat some rest. Like again, I know Cat's defense has left much to be desired, but that could also be a case of like, hey, this guy's maybe you'll get more out of him in the fourth quarter defensively if he's playing 33 minutes or 35 minutes versus 38 or 40. And I also I think it's important to note that like we don't actually know any of this is true, but the point is to like try to find solutions. And right now, the solution and to be fair, the criticism, and I understand the criticism, is because the solution for Tibbs many times in his career has just been play the good players I trust more. And I'm a lot more okay with that in the back end of the season or in the playoffs, obviously. I think it's too early for him to be, kind of redlining these guys this close. So Sims, look, I don't love the guy. I have made that very clear very many times on here and on Twitter and our Discord and whatever. But I would like to kind of, if he's playing well, then I don't mind him playing more. Like, why would I mind that? You have to use what you have at your disposal. And if he doesn't trust Huck 40 right now, which whatever, then the solution to that should not just be, well, Towns has to play more and that's that. Like, I think you have to be a little bit more creative.
Yeah, and because you're also, it affects the depth at other positions too, right? Because if Cat is playing a ton of minutes at center, that means he can't play any at power forward. That means OG is not getting a ton of rest, right? Um, so it cascades down. For Cat particularly, you're going to need him to play minutes at both positions to spare OG a little bit too. And so they're going to have to. Tibbs will have to adapt a little bit. I think he's going to have to also just play more wings, especially if he's doing this. So this is not to be hypercritical of Tibbs. I will say it's always been this thing, right? Like he's going to want to play the guys that he trusts more. We've often said, we have to try different things. You have to be willing to try. This is a coach that it takes a lot to get him to experiment, right? I think he treats practice like a game, and there's probably a lot of data he sees there. When I see data, I mean information points from watching that we're not privy to, right? And if he wasn't willing to experiment when the COVID season, right, or the season where we went 3-17, when there weren't real stakes, right? There were not big time. We need to make a run at the championship stakes. The stakes are higher than ever right now. So one way to look at that is like we cannot take risks. We have to rely on what we know. The other way to look at it is, we have to get creative and come up with some other ways to attack. And that's just going to be a philosophical thing with Tibbs. He doesn't tend to experiment until his back's against the wall, but we're kind of getting to that point. And to the point about, like playing deep bench guys, eventually he goes there, right? He started playing Burks and Bogdanovich at the end of last year. I think Ryan should be a much easier pill to swallow there. I don't know what's going on with Dadier, but maybe that happens at some point. But I think he is getting to that point, especially if they sustain another injury or two, where you have to play the bench guys and live with it. And I think that I think the front office should give him some kind of reassurance there that nobody's going to kill you because you gave Jericho Sims 15-20 minutes, lost the game, but or played a poor team tough, but gave Cat more rest one day, right? Where it's on the front office too to communicate that those are not the things that he's going to get canned for.
Yeah.
Or I don't think he's going to get canned no matter what, but those are not the things that he's going to feast, that they're going to be upset about.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. And yeah, I agree. He's not. They just extended him, like, fucking this summer. So, I think it was a 3-year extension on top of his last year. So really, you're on the books for him for 4 more years, like another guy that we recently got put on the books for 4 more years.
Oh wow!
But
I do not think he's like that guy. So
no, he's
I'm
not
a lot more
like that
optimistic about the next 4 years for the Knicks.
But yeah, so I that's just not even like anybody talking about fire tips. It's like, guys, just you got to get over it. It's not happening right now. It would really take like a complete fucking disaster season for that to happen. So let's hope that I'm not hoping for that. I don't know about you. That's just me.
And even this baseline, unless they have repeated severe injuries, and by that I mean one of Cat or Brunson, really. I don't think this is going to be a disaster season. Maybe they underperform, but given just how well they've been playing still already, despite some of these issues, like disasters, they might lose in the first round if they get the 6th seed or something and lose to Cleveland in the first round. That's like or they just have the bottom fall out with injuries, but then you're like, are you going to fire Tibbs for injuries? So yeah, to your point, I just don't. There aren't a lot of outcomes where it looks like that can happen. I read 80,000 simulations, and I didn't find too many in which Tibbs gets canned.
Yeah. I do want to talk about Brunson. I feel like people are really down on the start of the season, and I just want to read some things off. Jalen Brunson is averaging 25 points, 3 rebounds, 6.5 assists on 47.5, 41.5, 81 splits from the field, 53.5 effective field goal percentage, and a 58.2 true shooting percentage. I don't actually disagree that he's been up and down and not really at his best. That is encouraging that he's not at his best because those numbers are really good. The main thing for him, and I will say this, one, it was his 2-point percentage has been starting to tick up. He's at 50 right now, 50% from 2. So that's good to see. He has got to take more threes. He's got to take more threes. I don't care if that means he has to take more pull-ups, contested. I don't care what it is. He's taking 5.3 this year. Like it's just, you've got to take more when you shoot as well as he does. Like, and it's not just about that he can shoot a better percentage, or it's not even about, it's about making, like, for example, when we played Indiana, a lot of the conversation after the game, right, was about we didn't take enough threes and we're not creating enough threes. And we've seen these wild swings, right, where the Knicks take a bunch of threes one game and they don't take any other game and whatever. And it's like the offense has been good pretty much throughout, but you want to take more threes because it gives you a higher ceiling potential. And I don't think you need to be like, I don't think the Knicks need to lead the league in 3-point attempts, but you've got to be, in that top 10 area. And Tibbs himself has talked about this on multiple occasions in the past, where they want to be top 10 in 3-point attempts, 3-point attempts. So I think it's fair to say that's probably a goal of the teams. Part of the reason they're not able to create a lot of threes, part of it is Brunson isn't taking pull-ups. So you're not forcing defenses in a lot of ways. They're not really, if you watch, I mean, obviously you're watching and everybody listening to this is fucking watching Knicks games. There are so many times where he's coming up, bring the ball up the floor, and he has a chance to take a pull-up, doesn't take it. Comes around the screen, if they're running a high pick and roll, has a chance to take a pull-up, doesn't take it. I feel like he's probing a lot because he knows, oh, I'm playing with Cat. He's a stretch 5. There's space inside the paint. And I get that. But your job is not just to get to the shots that you want. It's also to take the shots that open up the floor for everybody else. And he's just, to me, he's still struggling to find the right balance. And a lot of it is down to 3-point shooting. And just to kind of tie a bow on that, right, his 3-point attempt rate last year was 31.9. This year, it's back down to 28.2. That's just, you went from nearly a third of your shots to being threes to, which I still think, I don't know about if you agree with this. I still felt like last year he probably could have and should have taken more threes. I know some of that was related to, once Randall was out, it got it changed on him and whatever. But that still needs to be the case now. And also, like, some of this isn't even just about pull-ups. There are times where I've seen him get a swing, a kick out or a swing pass for a three, and he pump fakes and drives, or he pump fakes and he does a sidestep, and then he doesn't actually create the separation, so he has to reset. And it's like, dude, you're a fucking awesome three-point shooter. Shoot the fucking ball when you're open. And thank God we didn't do a podcast after that fucking Hawks game, because I would have blown I would have lost my mind watching that fourth quarter where I'm like, OG, why are you passing up a corner three to swing the ball to Josh Hart? Like, why is that a decision for you? But yeah, like, I think Brunson's a huge part of this. Like, he's got to it's incumbent upon him to take more pull-up threes, quite frankly. He's got to take more. And if he takes more, I think that'll open up the floor for everybody. And we've kind of lamented the fact that, man, we have Cat at the 5, but it still feels like we're not getting clean driving angles. Well, yeah, I mean, I think some of that is also like, hey, guys are not really playing all the way up on Brunson at times. So when he does kind of swing it, it's easier for the big to get back and cover at the rim. Like, I think there's more to it than just, oh, well, guys are not, they're leaving Josh Hart wide open. I don't think that's the only problem, or the only cause of that. And then also, like, yeah, Mikal Bridges, like, I understand his three ball from above the break has not been great. He's got to take more threes. Like, he's either got to take more threes, or he needs to start getting to the rim more instead of kind of like getting to the rim, but then choosing to shoot a fadeaway midi instead. Like, I'm happy he has that shot because it's a good shot and he's good. Like, he's good at that shot specifically. But layups are good. They're better. They're higher percentage shots. Please take them. That would be fantastic. But yeah, that's the other good thing to see the last couple of games has been OG kind of looking more explosive in the half court offensively, dunking the ball and stuff like that. So that's good. But the Brunson thing to me is, I think he's got to take more threes. And I also think he's got to get more comfortable understanding that, hey, just because Cat is on the floor with me doesn't mean that, like, oh, I have to go inside now every time because look at all this space. Like, no, I think they're kind of like, I think teams are baiting the Knicks into that a little bit, right? I think that's what the Pacers did. They baited them into that kind of math problem in the fourth quarter. And we saw this in other games too, right? We saw this in the Celtics game in the season opener. We saw this in the game against Cleveland, I thought, to some extent as well. Stacy, you are muted.
The Pacers play that game, and that doesn't always work out for them, right? This is a team, even against Boston, right? It's tough to really just keep this offensive team down. Even in the playoffs, Boston won that series pretty handily. I think it was 4-1 or 4-0. It was a sweep, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but there were mostly competitive games, and the Pacers had some high offensive outputs against good defense. So when they're shooting the ball well, it's tough. They are a team, and when they're not shooting the ball well and they make that gamble, they lose badly, right? We saw that in the first Knicks game, where if you give us a lot of twos, we are going to have a high offensive floor. They're betting that they can beat that. And the way the Knicks are defending right now, it ended up being a good bet, but it doesn't always work out. I did want to, on the Brunson point, I'll note a couple of things on the threes. Number one, he is actually only 35% of his threes are assisted this year. That's the lowest of his career. For comparison's sake, 58% of his threes last year were assisted. So he's taking a lot more unassisted threes. Last year, he took 4.3 pull-ups a game, and he shot, I think, 41%. This year, he's shooting 48%, but on 3.9 attempts per game. So there is somewhat of a decrease in his pull-ups per game, but not as pronounced. Where he has seen a huge decrease is he took 2.5 catch and shoot threes last year per game, and that has gone down to 1.3, so almost halved. Shooting over 40% both years, but I do think, like, it has to be both. So I do agree that it's one. He probably should have been taking more pull-up threes than he was last year, right? So he's gone kind of backwards from what you'd have already liked to see increase. But I do think like an even bigger source of where they can generate offense for him is catch and shoot. And this is something I've seen kind of both sides. A lot of people said, well, Randall generated a lot of catch and shoot threes. If you ask someone like Prez is going to say, or maybe this isn't Prez, but Prez was saying, well, look, we can talk to
I think we can blame Prez if we want.
Well, I don't want to misattribute if I'm remembering this wrong, or if someone else has said this. But we can talk about till we're blue in the face about Brunson being a great catch and shoot guy, but when he has the ball in his hands, when we're at our best. Yes, but I think when you're having a 3-point problem, it's not bad to get your elite catch and shoot three guy some extra attempts, especially when it's halved since last year. And I think that I think Cat has actually shown more as a passer. But I think maybe the next step is allowing Cat to post up a little bit more, running some off ball stuff for Brunson to get some catch and shoot looks. But there's a couple of sources to get him going a little bit more there. And I will say this: his free throw attempts have come back up, but they're still lower than last year. He's averaging 6-point attempts, 6.5 attempts per game. Now it's down to 5.9. I think league wide they're letting a lot more contact go. Maybe Brian Windhorst just put bad juju on him with those dark arts comments. But I think I think to solve the pull up thing, I think you've talked about this before. Setting screens higher up the court will help. I think just he's been more aggressive. I think in transition, that's where I think he's most comfortable taking those pull ups. And I think but I also think taking advantage of the fact that you have Cat as a passer, he has gravity. And kind of leading a little bit more into running Brunson off ball and taxing his defender off ball, making them kind of use different muscles. And that should help, by the way, open up drives for other people. Right? Brunson draws so much gravity. If you have him moving around screens, he's always shown a willingness to do it. But I think there's a potential to get a little bit more, squeeze a little more juice there as well.
Yeah. I think it's possible. I just think there's a lot of stuff that the Knicks still have not leaned into enough. One thing I really would like to see, and I got pretty frustrated by this in the Hawks game, and in general, this is why I have real sympathy for Mikal Bridges, where it feels like, yes, it does seem like there's an understanding of this guy has to be our third option, but the only way we seem to be attacking it is they're putting a smaller guy in Mikal Bridges, let's throw him the ball in the post. And that's just so, I just think it's so uncreative, and it's not really something I particularly am oh yeah, let's just turn Mikal Bridges into some, high frequency post player. I don't know, that one doesn't really make sense to me. And that Hawks game, they kept trying to do it against Trae Young. And I thought Trae Young was straight up fouling him and they weren't calling it. So he had trouble establishing position in the post.
But that's what he always struggles with, by the way. It always ends up being that turnaround fadeaway. He relies on his length, but in terms of creating space with his lower body,
yeah, he doesn't have it.
Like DeRozan, for example, to compare him to another guy who does that a lot, he's really strong, right? He bodies guys, and he can often turn that into rim attempts. You never see that from Bridges.
Yeah. So DeRozan's got a caboose. Mikal Bridges not so much. But
okay, Phil.
Yeah, but I would just why can you not use him as a screener for Brunson? Why can you not how is that not something that you're leaning into? And in general, we haven't even seen, I don't think we've seen enough of Josh Hart as an on-ball screener this year. And we talked about, and this is where, again, I understand you're going through a major shift in how you're trying to play, in what, you're going from Isaiah Hartenstein as your 5 to Cat as your 5. That's just a massively different thing. But you just look at the ball and player movement we kind of got accustomed to in the back half of last year, and compare that to some of the stuff we're seeing now, where there's these phases where it looks great and it's all flowing, and then there are times where it's just very stagnant and very ISO heavy and stuff like that. That's frustrating. And also, dude, the Knicks pace right now is fucking absurd. And I do think some of this is because of the rotation, right? Where he's okay, I'm playing 7 guys max right now, really. I need to kind of buy rest in some ways. But it makes your life a lot harder offensively. Like the Knicks are at 90, their pace is pretty like by far and away the lowest in the league. 95.3. The next two, the second is Philly, who we played tonight. So this should be a real fucking barn burner. 96.7, and Brooklyn's at 96.7. They're tied at second. So, I just I wonder about that. Like, can that like can we just push the pace a little bit so we're not just constantly playing, in like these grinded out half court sets, especially the end of games? Because I do think that takes a toll on you over the course of a game where if you're trying to grind it out all the time.
And it's also, to your point, I mean, to that point, if guys are rotating and a little bit more fresh, they might be willing to push a little bit more, right? At the end of games, right? If you're, I mean, Hart is going to push no matter what, but one of the best sources of offense is OG just getting out on the break, right? Bridges getting out on the break. When they played 40 minutes or 35 minutes, it's tough to find that energy in the fourth quarter. But I think it looks like they want to push the pace more. There have been games where I've just seen them take the ball out of the net and run. So I think that's definitely something Tibbs wants to do. But let's give credit to other teams. I think there's been a focus on getting back in transition against the Knicks. But they also, it's worth noting, they're 20th now, I think, in the league in offensive rebounding. You're going to want to, when you can't rely on those extra possessions, you're going to have to figure out a way to really boost your efficiency. Because right now they don't have easy ways to win the possession battle. They're a good defensive rebounding team, solid offensive rebounding team, like mediocre offensive rebounding team. It's no longer a strength the way it was. They don't turn the ball over, so that helps. But they don't have the kind of possession advantages they were getting before. So anything you can do to boost that efficiency, and I think they have a lot of great transition players. And the thing is this, like when you push the pace, it's not just about transition buckets. It's about the defense is scrambled, right? And so when you have when you have Brunson coming downhill, Hart coming downhill, your defense is scrambling back. And then you have this 7-footer who's just trailing and walks into an open three. That's how that happens. That's what makes Boston so dangerous. I think that just, and I think another thing that's hurt that is teams are putting ball pressure on Brunson. And, they don't really have a lot of other ball handlers they trust to bring the ball up. And so Brunson is constantly bringing the ball up for 6, 7, 8 seconds. You don't get into your sets until 15, 16 seconds. That's another thing. As they build chemistry and kind of cohesion, it can help to really have close to that 24 seconds. If the first set doesn't work, run it again, run something else, right? If you're getting into your set 14, 16 seconds, you really only get one action to run, and then it's ISO. So that kind of exacerbates some of those issues. I don't think it's all on Tibbs, and I don't think Tibbs is telling them to play slow. I think there's probably a combination of some fatigue. I think there's probably some. I think it's in general teams are doing a good job, especially after makes, of pressing Brunson and slowing down the Knicks getting into their offense. And I don't know what the solution. Maybe the solution is let Hart bring the ball up more. Maybe it's have Brunson get screens in the backcourt. Maybe it's run a specific play to kind of punish that. I don't know. But I agree that even if it's not just kind of more transition, getting into your sets faster so you can, get more reps just running stuff, if nothing else.
Yeah. Totally agree with that. But yeah, I don't know. Like I think just overall, I would not be too concerned with where the Knicks are so far. Like I also came into the season not expecting them to be very good through the first 20 games. Like I thought this is kind of what they would be, up and down, 500-ish team. And obviously with the injuries, that doesn't help the cause. So they need to get through that themselves. But yeah, like hopefully, you should get Cam Payne back pretty soon here. I know people don't love him. Tibbs clearly trusts him more than he trusts Tyler Kolek right now. And if you're interested in buying rest for guys, you need that. And then hopefully we get Precious back soon, because I think Precious I think the Knicks really need him. There have been too many games this year where it feels like the Knicks are an athlete short, and Precious is probably one of the most, if not the most athletic guy on the team. So they could really, really use
Houston
him.
was the most noticeable. I think Houston was the game where I really felt we were out physical and out athleted for sure.
Yeah, Houston. And then I thought there were points in that Atlanta game, where they had like Jalen Johnson and Okongwu and Riza
Yeah.
Yeah, you've kind of felt that too. So getting Precious back, I think, will help a lot with that as well. So I'm fine with that. Defensively, I don't know. I really feel like a lot of this is just a combination of guys getting familiar with each other. Think they need to talk more. It's one thing I've really noticed. Like, you've got to have guys talking more, and it can't just be like I remembered on this possession thing to talk. Like, no, it needs to be constant communication. You need to be on a string, which takes time. It does take some fuck up sometimes to kind of get that understanding. And I do think Tibbs, again, I think he needs to change up his pick and roll coverages here a bit too to help these guys out. And then also, like, again, I don't want to absolve him because I don't think he needs to be absolved. I think he deserves blame for it. Mikal Bridges has to be better. Like, he's got to be better than what he has been. I mean, that fourth quarter against the Pacers. Look, man, I understand when Tyrese Halliburton has it going. He's not like the easiest cover in the league and whatever. You've got to make it harder on him than that. I mean, there's way too many possessions I'm watching with him where he doesn't get into the ball handler at all. And not only that, he's just standing square. So the ball handler can just go whichever way, and you're already playing from behind. And, when he's going through screens, he's doing a really good job of getting around screens, but he's not getting through screens, which is a different thing. Getting through screens means you're fighting through and you're making contact and you're not making it easy for the ball handler to get through without, with the freedom of movement. Whereas when you're just getting around screens the way he is, he's almost always playing from behind. He's like conceding that he's going to play from behind without even attempting to fight through. He's got to be more physical. I'm sorry. Like, he's got to be more physical than this. And the Knicks need to get that out of him somehow, especially if they're going to keep using him at the point of attack. He's got to be more physical than this. And they've got to help him, like, in terms of, hey, man, maybe your help with the nail needs to be there sooner. You got to show with the nail faster. Play Karl Towns higher at the level. Like, there are things they can do, and there are things he can do. So it is a collective thing right now. It is not just about one guy. I think it's very convenient to blame it on Mikal Bridges or blame it on Karl Anthony Towns. But I don't think it's as simple as that. I think it's a group. And I think very specifically, Tom Thibodeau has to shoulder a lot of the responsibility for that. And he needs to find a better solution moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take time. I mean, I know you said 20 games was kind of your benchmark. Has that changed? So it doesn't sound like.
No, yeah, that's still where I'm at.
So, like, what would what would kind of, with the roster as is, assuming campaign is out, what are some of the changes you'd make immediately besides what we talked about? So it sounds like less drop for Cat.
Yeah, way less drop for Cat. I would be hard hedging with him, trapping, blitzing.
I wouldn't even mind switching at this point. Like,
I would switch late in clock. I would not want to switch early on. I think then you're putting him in a dangerous position. He's already injured, or not injury prone. Foul prone as it is. I think you want to avoid switching him too much. Depending on the matchups. If it's like a wing, if it's like Paul George for tonight, for example, I wouldn't mind that switch. I don't think Paul George is he's not the explosive guy that he used to be. So I don't think you need to necessarily, you're not risking that, like, having him get blown by 50 times or something. I'd be fine with that. Also, I'm assuming that OG Anunoby will be on Paul George. So if you have to switch OG on Embiid, I don't mind that at all. So, I mean, I'm okay with switching a little bit more, but it'd be very matchup dependent and then shot clock dependent as well. Which, again, by the way, that stuff is about, that's stuff that you need to develop and kind of understand intrinsically over time how you're going to defend different situations and coverages. So that's that would be one. I mean, yeah, but like, yeah, just trapping, blitzing, hard hedging, way more aggressive coverages at the level. And obviously that would also necessitate that you have a lot of communication because your backside rotations are going to be key. And that can only happen insofar as Tibbs allows it to happen. So that's really where I'm at with it. Again, I don't mind playing cat and drop at times. But to me, that really can't be your fastball, man. It can't be your fastball. And quite frankly, if Tibbs is this married to drop coverage, I know the immediate reaction will be like, fire him, get rid of him, and that's fine. I think that might be a conversation for another day if that's really how strongly he is like married to this thing. Which in the past he hasn't been, or at least not in New York. I think he's been a lot more flexible in New York than in the past. Although we saw this in the Pacers series too, right? Where we're like, oh my God, why are we can we do anything to just stop giving up wide open threes to Miles Turner every time they run a pick and roll? Like, can we do anything here differently? So I think he still has issues with that. But if he's that married to it, then I'm sorry, when Precious comes back, you basically just have to start him. Like, you just have to get another big on the floor because this is not tenable. Because I don't, some of this, I don't even necessarily think it's just about, oh, well, teams are shooting such a great percentage against us now. I think a lot of it is also the rebounding hasn't been the best, right? So you're giving up more second chance opportunities. And then because you're like, you need more size to almost like cover more space because of how you're if you're playing drop with cat. I don't know. I think there's a pretty valid argument. I mean, I argued before the season that I thought Tibbs would start Precious, and obviously Precious got hurt, and he didn't start him in the preseason. So a lot of credit to Tibbs for at least embracing the 5-outness of the moves the Knicks made. But it's got to be, we need more. We need we need more than just embracing 5-out on offense. We need to find solutions on defense. So those would be like, again, I do think that playing two bigs together is a real viable pathway for this team to be.
I mean, we've been saying it for 4 years. Why doesn't Tibbs play two bigs together more? Like, we've been complaining about how he never does that. Remember, we wanted Precious and we wanted Hartenstein and Sims minutes together last year. But it was Precious and Sims, right?
Yeah, Precious, the great duo. Yeah, no, I mean, that's just something that I really believe it should be a strength of this team. Like, you can, like, and Cat, for whatever his flaw is, I think he's shown that he's a really good offensive rebounder, actually. And that's with him at the 5. You put him at the 4, yeah, sure, he's going to space more in that role, so he won't have individually as much of an offensive, rebounding impact. But if you put him next to a guy like Precious or Mitch, obviously, okay, well then now that collective is stronger than your current collective, and that's a strength that they have not leaned into. By the way, his defensive rebound percentage right now is fucking wild. He has a 32.4 defensive rebound percentage. And the Knicks, for as much as they struggled at times, which again speaks to like the very up and down nature of,
I think they're 11th or something, right?
Yeah, they're 11th. They have a 77.1 defensive rebound percentage, which is not bad. I mean, it's fine. Like, for example, the Knicks are at 77 and 77 defensive rebound percentage. That's 11th. Cleveland's at 77.1. They're 10th. Boston is at 77.3 or 77.3. They're 7th. Brooklyn is also 77.3. They're 8th. And just like the Bucks are 78.8 defensive rebound percentage, and they're terrible. So it's not the end all be all, but it is nice to see that they're not getting it completely annihilated on the glass every single night, and that Karl Anthony Towns individually has done a good job on his own.
Yeah, I mean, I think the offensive rebounding was always a thing with him. He's a good rebounder. I think defensive rebounding was something that was worried. I don't put too much stock in the individual defensive rebounding percentage. I think it's really just the rim protection and the pick and roll defense. There's a stat I don't think he's given up a ton of events, but there's a stat now. It's like it was 81% people are shooting at it.
That is just complete bullshit.
I mean, for context, last year before he got hurt, a lot of people were thinking Mitchell Robinson was having a defensive player of the year type of season. Opponents shot 70% at the rim against him. So those things, and I think it's really only 3 or 4 attempts a game that Cat has to contest, which is not some super high volume. It's not like teams are just, I think they're opportunistic. But my take is I think the pick and roll defense and the defending in space has been the bigger issue really than that. I don't know if those are your thoughts.
Maybe, I don't know. I think there's a lot of shit going on, right? We're giving opinions and takes, but there's so many factors in what is happening, and I think that's what makes it hard to discuss it rationally or in good faith. It just feels like it's very convenient to pile on Cat and Bridges. It just is.
They are the new guys, right? So
yeah. And they're your marquee acquisitions, right? And they're the new guys. So it's easy to pile on them. And they probably have been the 2 most culpable in our defensive issues. I think that's fair to say. I also think it's understandable why that might be the case. And that, just like they're learning how to execute Tibbs' system, I think Tibbs is also learning about them. He's still figuring out what they do. Like he's talked about Cat's a more mature player than he was when he coached him in Minnesota. But and I obviously that's true. That was 6 years ago. So just because he coached him in Minnesota doesn't mean he knows exactly who he is now, right? He's not the same player in so many different ways. So it's a relearning process for him there. Obviously, he's never coached Mikal Bridges before. And I know that the idea was Brunson and Hart, they'll have this natural chemistry with Bridges, so that will be seamless.
That always seemed insane to me. They haven't played together in 6 years? Yeah,
6 years. Also, I think the reason Dante's game was more seamless is the type of player Dante was. Yeah. Where he's just I'm going to spot up and I'll launch as soon as I have space. That's just an easier fit. It's kind of like the Matt Ryan thing we were talking about, right? Where it's a guy like that, it's easy for him to fit anywhere because his game stays the same no matter who he plays with. Whereas Bridges, his game had changed drastically from what he was initially in Phoenix to what he was in Brooklyn to now what he's being asked to do again. And when you go through changes like that, it's going to impact your impact, but it's also just going to impact, it's going to take time for you to get back into what you need to do. And that adaptation needs to come from both Bridges himself, but also from Tibbs and from Brunson, understanding okay, this guy is not Dante DiVincenzo. So the way I have to kind of get him involved and play off of him and all those type of things, it involves it is a different thing. It is a different process. And we've seen the good parts. We've seen games where that it's all good and they're flowing and Bridges is super involved. I mean, go back and watch the second game of the season, right? Against the Pacers. Go back and watch the game against the Pistons or wherever. You can find games where it's working and it looks great. It's not going to be every night because they're still feeling things out. And we talk just kind of wrap up with this. One thing, we mentioned with Brunson is he needs to get his threes up, and you mentioned this is the lowest percentage of assisted threes he's taken so far.
No, you're right.
And the thing I would say is I think what can really help with that is if they can incorporate and utilize Bridges more on ball in a way to get Brunson off the ball and spot up. That is how you kind of unlock a lot of things. And you've got to maximize everybody. Right now, they're doing a hell of a job of getting the most out of Cat. Cat's putting up great numbers. Cat's been great. I have no problem with Cat. I know the defense has been its own issue, and we talked about that plenty. But offensively, I mean, this is as much as you could have expected and then some, maybe. But I don't think Bridges has been incorporated seamlessly. That's okay. I understand that takes time. But getting that working and getting Brunson playing off of that and getting Brunson comfortable himself playing off of Cat, who again is a very different player from the centers he's used to, and playing next to Bridges, who is honestly a different wing than he's used to, right? Like, I don't like RJ Barrett was clearly not the same player as Mikal Bridges. None of the wings we had last year.
Well, I think wings in Tibbs' offense, generally, it's tough to get involved, right? I think that you and I both think Quentin Grimes handled it poorly. But whatever the case may be, you guys like just off-ball players on the wing, Bullock, right? It's kind of it's a come and go thing. You're not going to have too much run for you. The offense is really centered around the point guard and center, and the guys off ball kind of just have to find their spots. That can be pretty challenging for a lot of guys, or attack the glass and cut, right? So I think when you look at the types of guys who've had success in Tibbs' offense as wings, right? You have guys that just attack the rim and rebound and play tough, right? So guys like Luol Deng, Butler, and I would put Hart in that mold. He's not Jimmy Butler, right? But he's a guy who cuts, he attacks the rim, he attacks the paint. That's how Tibbs' offense, I think, generates a lot of its movement and a lot of its opportunities, right, off rim pressure. The other guy that's had a lot of success is DiVincenzo, and that's because he doesn't need anything run for him. He just gets shots up. Bridges doesn't really fit cleanly into either of those archetypes. And, wings who need the ball in their hands a little bit without being the focal point. That's been, I think, that like RJ Barrett, should he be the focal point? No. But he needs to be involved, right, in a certain way. I think guys who are in that in between, not a pure off-ball player, not a pure on-ball player, not a pure rim attacker, not a Dante type shooter. Finding like Tibbs himself, it's a challenging offense I've seen for a lot of wings to kind of fit in, and that's not a criticism of him. It's just I think it's a lot of point guards have had great success over him. A lot of centers have had great success. So every coach has these trade-offs in their offense, and Bridges is the guy I think that's trying to manage and work through those.
Yeah, I totally agree. Are there any other thoughts you want to get out before we get out of here?
I just think there's like a non-zero chance that Nick Sirianni could become the worst coach to ever win a Super Bowl. Like, most of Philadelphia wants him fired, even though they're 7-2. I think I can't remember the last time a coach this bad had a team doing this well. I guess last year until the bottom fell out.
Basically until this exact same point, Stacy.
Yeah, well, that could still happen. I do think they're well positioned.
No, they're better. They're way better.
Defense is especially. I think Fangio's been much better.
I think their offense is better too.
Yeah, I think Saquon's helped a lot more than I thought he would, and I'm not even I didn't even brag to Giants fans. I'm not going to do it now because I was definitely on that. I think he's a little overrated thing, but I think he's been awesome. So, Bill's looking good too. So, you had that whole clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose speech. So, to start, so we should come back full circle with Bills.
Yeah.
Is Josh Howland your Matt Saracen or Vince Howard?
I would hope he's not our Matt Saracen. I think they're slightly different builds of human beings.
He's built more like voodoo, right?
Yeah, he's built like voodoo. He's like voodoo with Matt Saracen's spirit. How about that?
And melanin, but
yeah, and melanin, which is really the key there. No, no, I don't know. We'll see. The Bills were not supposed to be. They're supposed to be like a retooling year. I'm very happy with where they are, no matter what the fuck happens basically this season. Although when they lose to the Chiefs in the playoffs by 2 points because their kicker makes a 75-yard field goal, I'll probably be annoyed by that.
Harrison Butker, that would suck.
Yeah, everything about them sucks actually. Just Butker, MAGA Mahomes, everything about them is annoying. I still can't believe they won that game this weekend.
If the Eagles
bullshit thing ever.
If the Eagles don't win, one thing I do think is maybe it's because obviously I've lived there for some time in the area. It's cool to see just the energy around the Lions. I like Dan Campbell a lot, just the way they play. So if the Eagles don't win the Super Bowl, and if it had to be, to quote what's Al Pacino's character, Donnie Brasco, tell him I'm glad it had to be him. If it had to be anyone, so if the Eagles have to lose to anyone, I wouldn't mind the Lions. It's been cool to see how much they've improved.
Yeah, they're great. They were all. I camped that win against the Texans was awesome, and they're just fun, man. Dan Campbell's awesome too. So
I hope you bet that because CJ Stroud never beats a team from Michigan. So
I bet that before the game. I bet it during the game. So it's a good game. I have nothing else. I don't think I gotta say, man. I feel it's fun to New York football. The city of New York's football teams. Sorry, guys. Better luck next year. I don't know.
I mean, they had to die so that the Knicks and the Rangers and the Mets and the Yankees could be good, right? So, and the Liberty. So, I mean, somebody had to get taken down a notch, and I guess that was the not the Jets have never really been good in my life, but I guess the Giants.
The Jets were good. I mean, they made a couple AFC Championship games.
Yeah, was it a couple? I know they made one with Mark Sanchez.
They made two in a row.
Colts and
09 and it was Colts and
must have been the Pats.
I don't think it was the Pats actually.
Steelers, maybe.
Steelers. Colts and Steelers. Yeah, that was a tough one. I remember that. All right. Well, I think that about does it. Here, Stacy, let the people know they can find you. Plug anything you'd like to plug.
Find me at Stacy Fad 89. Thinking about Blue Sky. We'll keep you updated there. And I'll just plug all the great work at the Strickland.
I will echo those sentiments. Thinking about, I probably will be posting more on Blue Sky than Twitter. It will not be a instant process, so I'll still be on both probably for a little while. But yeah, give me a follow on Blue Sky if you're out there. I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you probably already follow me on Twitter, so I'm not going to tell you to do that. It's the same at. So feel free. All right, that is our show for today. Thank you to our sponsor, Bet Online. I hope everybody has a great week other than the Philadelphia 76ers. And I will see everybody on Friday. Peace.